That's right.
So.
Well, I think that usually when we think of Paul, we don't think in terms of phases of ministry. We just think in terms of different New Testament books and things that he did, and we don't see this arc in terms of his development, and there's that there's that really productive time.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul's probably about 40.
Yeah, if he's born in 2, he's 47.
There's different ideas. Yeah, but
yeah.
But he's I mean, he's lived a lot of life.
Yeah.
And now it's that last portion that's the amazingly productive.
Yeah.
Kind of this is the for this I was born part.
Mm.
And I think I mean, one of the things, and I hope this doesn't sound like we're just valuing ourselves too much, but I mean, we should feel a sense of destiny.
Mm-hmm.
I think God calls us, and you talk about sovereign call.
Yeah.
To feel like and there is a sense. It's not about our ministry, but there's something that the Lord is calling us to do that He isn't calling anybody else to do in the same way or in the same
Yeah.
and to have that sense of destiny.
Well, to your point, Paul might have thought that these missionary journeys was his call, but perhaps his call was to write all these books and to solidify the foundation of the church. So sometimes what we think is what God has called us to do isn't what God has called us to do. He's got this other divine thing going on that we can't understand until we really reach this level here and look back. Or maybe not even. Maybe Paul died never understanding the significance of the books that he wrote and the work that he did.
He's probably frustrated too because he wanted to go, but he got stuck.
Exactly.
So there's nothing to do besides writing because he wanted to communicate to the churches.
Right.
And that became much bigger thing.
Maybe God needed to tie him down in Rome so he could write these books because of that reason.
Well, I think kind of to that point too, perhaps he didn't really know, which probably is true. He didn't, but the point being that is probably true of us as well, right? We're like you were in Escalon for a while, right? I mean, I've been thinking about this in my own life, as I'm growing older, and we don't always know what God was doing, not only for you in your life in Escalon, but what was the effect of that ministry there for the people that were in Escalon, and the fruits of them over multiple generations that you will never know until you are with the Lord again, and then God's plan is revealed. And so to me that's exciting to think about too, not only how it's affecting us in the here and now, but our what God has done through us, through our ministry, and how that ripples out into other people's lives as well. And someday we're going to be able to see that full circle.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that people have said. I mean, we've got to remember that Paul, is chained in Rome I'm teaching through Ephesians right now at our group, and he's writing these letters, but at the same time he's handcuffed to these soldiers in Rome, and these guys are coming to Christ because of his time there, and he's probably going, this is my Escalon, this is my heaven, this is my isolation, but things are popping there, although he probably would opt not to be there. And the thing that I look at as a young minister, very young minister, is I'm looking at all this time, and I usually think of Paul's life as just like he was just
cranking,
right, which he probably was to an extent, but that my mind is so fast paced that I feel like external pressure. I need to get through seminary and go out there and do like a billion things for the kingdom, or else I'm not going to hear good, well done, good and faithful servant. And it's just good to see that God's it. Unless He's the one that's doing it, I could go out there and do a bunch of stuff and not accomplish anything. So it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And that's reassuring and comforting.
Well, and I think possibly for you and the younger ones here in the class is look at Paul's first half of the life. I mean, you don't see all the good stuff till the second half of his life, right?
Okay.
And so to that end, right, don't be discouraged that it's not all happening now. You know what I'm saying? And so, you just.
Well, likewise, I'm also, now that I'm in my 40s, when I was younger, I was wanting to hurry up and do ministry. And now I'm going, wait a second, I'm getting older now. It's important to me to see that God used Paul in his 40s and 50s and 60s, and to great effectiveness, that it's not over. That you got to stand under the yoke, and keep our head, keep our head in the game, so that we can. I want to write these books. I want to pass on the legacy that God has called me to pass on, but I've got to stay in the game to do that at my age, and at the right phase where God has me. What do you think? I mean, I look at the issues of conflict and isolation and crisis here, and we talked a lot about that. So we've got the conflict with John Mark. We've got the conflict with Peter. We've got the shipwreck. We've got the being in prison. We've got all these things that are happening in the middle of all this. I mean, what would have Paul's life been without those three things? Conflict, crisis, and isolation. You got the isolation over here in Arabia. So we look at those things in ministry as negatives, as the enemy. I'm going to come against the devil because he's attacking me through this. And perhaps God's allowing the enemy to come at us, for sure. But looking at Paul's life and hopefully looking at my life and your life, we see that God does great things through conflict and isolation and crisis. And that it's really how we sort of persevere through those times that really, really allows God to work his best through that.
And what would those cities and those churches be had you not gone there?
Yes.
I'd be kind of curious to hear everybody say what phase they
Sure.
feel in right now.
What phase are you in? If you could plot your life, where are you at in this phase? You're a very modest group. Just say it. Where are you at? Lee, where are you at?
I'd say probably right in the middle of phase 3.
Okay. Where are you at?
I would say beginning of phase 3 maybe?
It's fair.
Yeah, probably in between 2 and 3.
Chuck, where are you at?
I feel like I should be in that phase 4, but spiritually, I feel like I'm always having to go back to phase 3, right?
Sure.
Relearn and be retaught and learning again who I am.
Yeah.
Probably somewhere between 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm. Sam, where you at?
It's tough. I'm going back and forth looking at the descriptions, and it's tough to say, but I guess it's hard. I mean, ministry maturing, but I feel like, I know my gifts. I'm using my gifts, but like as far as doing what I feel that the end is that I'm supposed to be doing, not a chance. So it's definitely probably phase 3. Training. It's definitely training.
How about you, Dean? Where you at?
I think I'm 5.
Yeah.
I think like really early kind of into it, but I feel like the Lord is kind of superintending things to help me to ease more into that. I certainly feel I feel like I'm functioning that way. Essentially.
Dorothy, what do you think?
For the most part, probably 3. A little bit of 4. I think I'm effective in ministry, in using my gifts and gone through enough to know my strengths and weaknesses and playing on my strengths. So on that side of it, probably a 4. But reading the book and reflecting, I sense that I actually haven't really intentionally developed new readers.
Sure.
So that relationship aspect of it.
Yeah.
So that's probably a 3 thing that I
Yeah.
still need to work on.
Tim, what do you think?
I feel like I'm starting phase 4.
I think I'm probably in phase 4, hopefully. I think sometimes I wallow in phase 3, but I'm trying really hard to stay in phase 4 right now. But there's just I just feel like a lot of times when God continues to point out, like I'm dealing a lot right now with, God is working on my faith, you know, so I'm kind of dipping back into phase 3 and reminding me that He's a God who cares and takes care of the problems, and we've dealt a lot over the past couple of months of running out of money in our organization and dealing with some staff transitions that have been really difficult. So God is working on some of the holes in my faith right now, which can be a little painful, but I see it as important and where He wants to bring me to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm in 4, but I think He's revisiting me in phase 3 a little bit. So let's talk about this again a little deeper. So rough out your own timeline, which we did. Identify the major boundary events in your life. Think back to what God was doing in each of these major time periods. Name the development phase with a label that captures what God was doing during that phase. So let's look back at this. So thinking about your life, some of you said you were in phase 3, some of you said you were in phase 4. What were some of the boundary events and some of the events that happened in the earlier phases that you can recognize? Go ahead.
I think the death of my mother was probably one of those crisis events at 3, and getting into marriage is a huge life maturing. But I'm about to have our first kid this Thursday, which is going to be massive. So
that's wonderful.
I'm ready to grow up, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? No, making you be all introspective on your last class. So.
For me, and I don't know if this is 2 or 3, probably a 3, is the last, probably about 5 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago, our church went through a really difficult time that 2 of our pastors left.
Oh.
So our church actually went through a few years without pastors, and
right.
I was in the leadership team. I was a growing leader, and I think that really, when I look back, that was actually a leadership acceleration course for me. And there was a lot of there was conflict resolution, there was stretching moments, and some of the leaders left the church, and whoever was left behind had to kind of hold down the fort. So that was, looking back, was, yeah.
Mine is mine really lays out clearly with the stuff. The inner life growth was really Hemet, and so I was about 30 when we left. Ministry maturing was kind of the associate role I had for a number of 13 years. And then for the last 11 years, really the life maturing and now kind of moving into convergence, where now I feel like I'm, I have the freedom now to kind of focus more on my gifting and things that I feel like are my greatest strengths.
Yeah.
But it's just, for me the ministry phase was really 30s and 40s and life maturing, and 50s for convergence. I'm not ready for the afterglow.
So can you identify a major leadership principle that God has shown you through your different phases? What is a leadership principle that God has shown you?
He's not in a hurry.
He's not in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
Amen to that.
Yeah, well, that for sure. It's kind of interesting. In the past, I've always been driven, and it's like, you gotta have this goal and go for it. And now, I'm very much just waiting on God, of course. It's not like we're not doing things. We got a lot of things piled on us, but I don't feel any drive to jump out and look for ministry, because God's gonna bring that opportunity and move you into the right place. I remember a pastor once, and it's just one of those things that you remember forever. One of the things he said was, if you really want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And you know, you feel uncomfortable at first doing that, but I mean, you don't need plans, you just need to be obedient.
It's something very incarnational, being among the people living among the people you are ministering to. I wonder if Paul had internet, if he would have done, if he was still gone there. But really, being in their lives and really knowing what they smell like, instead of just their names.
It's not about you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. First Corinthians, Paul talks about just when people know he has a servant of God. That's big for me.
I think a big difference between planning and preparing. We want to plan, with the mind of man, mind of a person plans their way, but the Lord directs their steps.
Right.
So to me, it actually brings you back to that preparation. You're prepared, and God's going to sovereignly do things. He's going to move you. I mean, personally, I just found when I take control and try to make something happen, invariably the wrong thing happens. So I mean, I think that when we look at something like this and we see how God sovereignly works in our lives, then I think that an appropriate response is to let Him work in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to trust that, be faithful, experience what we need to experience, don't get itchy. I mean, for a long time in my ministry, I always had another job sort of in my back pocket. I'd be talking to somebody and I'd have something cooking. I don't know if it was to flatter myself or, but it was just really such a complete lack of trust. This is like in my 30s, more early 30s, and and the Lord just sort of beat that out of me.
Yeah.
He really did. Having a wife and kids is, there's different things that you have where you don't just go in there and just give them the what for, and you know what I mean? You dream of these, you have these fantasies of. And so some of that was just really good. That's how the Lord used my family and other responsibilities to kind of keep me in a place so that there was development there. But He was preparing me.
Mine was kind of related to Dean's earlier sharing about when in conflict too. When you try to defend, it gets worse,
Yeah.
and it draws back from the experience with the church conflict that we had. That we try to talk it out and find out who's right, who's wrong, and sort it out. And we basically at the end was counseled by a senior pastor at a different church that kind of helped us work together. And then one thing he said that was really in my mind is that God doesn't really care who's right and who's wrong. God only cares about who loves the most. So that was something that I've been carrying.
I think He's less interested in the decision that's ultimately made and more interested in the process that we went through.
Mm-hmm.
I think who we are is, for a principle, who we are is more important than what we are. What we've learned this course, and just even opening up, John, as you were opening up with, 1 Timothy chapters 3 and 4. I mean, it wasn't what they were that Paul was alluding to as he wrote, Timothy. It was who he is in Christ, And as I get older, it's one of the things, that is becoming more and more important, is who I am. And accepting that too, who I am, in him, and so.
Right. Well, I pray that we all will stand under the yoke. And Dean said something at church about which I've learned is which I'm trying to learn. You said something, I don't know, a while ago. He said he equated God's blessing on our life with the way we're submitted. If you stay submitted, in your context, and D is not a heavy-handed, you gotta be submitted to me and stuff, but if you stay submitted under the hand of God, God's blessing will flow in your life. And I really, I'm trying to learn that, to stay submitted to pastoral authority, to stay submitted to the hand of God, the call of God in certain circumstances, and not to become squirrely under the pressure of submission.
Mhm.
That's been a big concept for me because I can be wild. Well, that's what I have.
Any final questions or comments?
I'd love to hear more about your ministry and the work that you're doing there.
Current? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're located in East Palo Alto. You can flip the lights on if you want.
You're looking dark in the camera here, so.
So I don't know if you know about East Palo Alto. It's about 20 miles north of here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a community that's, we're bordered by soon to be Facebook, Google, Sun Microsystems used to be there, Oracle's within view. But we're about a 2.5 square mile community that currently is about 65% Latino, about 15% African American, and the balance now is Pacific Islanders. So we're in essence a community of poverty in the middle of a sea of wealth. So East Palo Alto is a really dynamic community. There's lots of history there. So God called us there in 2000. I worked at another organization called Bayshore Christian Ministries for about 6 years. In the middle of that, we planted a church, and then ended up starting NCD in 2004 and 5. And like I mentioned before, it's a real broad vision about economic justice and empowerment. So it's just been a kind of a wild ride. We started the credit union in 2004. That opened and then really became through a very unique model where we raised all the capital locally. So we raised about $800,000 in startup capital and about $1.5 million in low interest deposits. And we brought the branch to our community by working a kind of a joint partnership deal with a credit union from the Central Valley, from the Modesto area. Unfortunately, that became victim of the 2008 banking crash, and the credit union didn't fail, but they had to close our branch. So that was an interesting time. It was a great success, and also it closed in November of last year, and it was really tough. It was one of these things that God's doing, through this period. But we did it. We opened it, and God blessed it for the time it was there, and really helped put our organization on the map through that project. In the middle of that, we started really looking again, going back to our mission, which is to address issues of systemic poverty. What I didn't say about East Palo Alto is in 2.5 square miles, there's about 97 youth serving agencies. So it is. Any time somebody has a good idea about how to reach the poor kids in East Palo Alto or poor kids, they come to EPA to try it out. Anytime Stanford University has a great idea, they come to rush in East Palo Alto and try it out. So what's happened then is that the nonprofit sector is in my view the largest employer in the community, and probably some of the largest power brokers are in the nonprofit community. It's really created this very funky dynamic where you have a lot of people making their living on the relatively small amount of poor people in EPA. And you've got I can just go on forever about that, all this stuff there. So what did I do? I started a nonprofit in East Palo Alto. I became part of the problem, not the solution. But what we really wanted to try a different take on it. To instead of dealing with sort of the fruit problems, meaning youth violence is a big issue. We wanted to start asking the question: why is there youth violence in the community? Instead of our dropout rate is about 65%. So 65% of our kids won't graduate from high school. Instead of trying to have tutoring programs for them because there's many, we want to look at the reasons why kids are dropping out and try to address those issues. So that's why we do things like credit unions. We have our Future Profits program, which is a very unique take. Given the fact that 6 out of 10 of our kids won't graduate from high school, 6 out of 10 of them are going to be in the workforce sooner rather than later. So we better give them the tools, how to manage their life, for those who are not going to make it through high school. Secondarily, we want to try to encourage the kids as much as possible to stay in by showing them the fiscal ramifications of them quitting high school. And so we spend a lot of time casting vision for their lives, but also talking about how much life actually costs. And so it's a very kind of unique program that got us birthed through NCUD. And the housing crisis has been pretty unique. So, but we're very lean. We're living on faith all the time. I'm calling Dean about every other month, crying and whining because I can't make payroll. God always seems to come through at the last minute and helps us make our payroll, and He's been faithful. And you know, we're just trying to do what God's done. But I'm also a chaplain for the police department. So we provide pastoral support for the PD, and we also do crisis counseling. So when there's a homicide or a rape, or anything that's sort of grave, we'll come in and provide crisis counseling, so the police officers don't have to do that.
Wow.
So we do death notifications, and that's some hardcore stuff. It's been very just a lot of the work that I do now is really dealing with economic issues. That's part of the ministry that God's called me to do. That's very real. So it's thank the Lord I haven't had to deal with any of that in a few months now. So we had some real tough. In 2006 we had 16 homicides, and we were out through the summer months and into the fall. We were out, at least once a week, telling some family that their kid has been kept in the streets. So it was tough. So I have one son, Sam. He's 16, going to be 16 this summer. He's a football player, and Melissa, and we just we're trying to serve God and stay alive in the middle of it.
Well, I want to share one compliment of John before he leaves us here. This is true. I was sitting around with the staff one day, and I just posed a question: if you could have one person pray for you, who would it be? And those who responded, 4 of them responded John Liotti, which surprised me.
Surprises me.
But it doesn't surprise me. But I mean, I was like, but there was just, I think there's an authenticity and a quality. There's a truthfulness to you, and they believe that the prayer of a righteous man avails much. Lord knows we could all be a little more righteous, right? But I think to me that was the highest compliment I think anybody could pay.
I appreciate
John.
that.
Yeah. So thank you, John, so much for
thank
coming and
y'all.
sharing with us tonight. So thank you. John will be packing it here. We're going to take a break right now.